Look around. Next to you is a friend you shared an afternoon with at the Jewish Museum. Across the room is someone who was a comforting face when you returned from the cemetery after burying a loved one. At the next table is someone you just met at the Pink Shabbat challah baking. These are your sisters. We are Shiva committee members, chesed activists, and culture seekers. We are caregivers, professionals, artists, and homemakers, giving our time to create bonds and help others. It is the KJ Sisterhood that makes this all possible, and it's been this way for 130 years. How we do it has changed over the decades, but what we do has remained timeless. A congregation without a sisterhood is like a home without a mother. It is the sisterhood that brings in a spirit of hospitality and warmth into a congregation. And with these words by Rabbi Joseph Lookstein, the KJ Sisterhood was reborn on March 25th, 1930. Ever since 1886, when it was called the Ladies' Auxiliary Society, women have been active in KJ and the community at large. The goals and activities of the 1930 Sisterhood echoed their Victorian counterparts: service to the synagogue, educational support, cultural and social activities, and charitable giving. As the decade progressed, the Sisterhood's voice became louder as its leadership encouraged KJ women to become more and more involved with the organization. At this time, the Sisterhood's uninterrupted support of Ramaz began in the form of scholarship aid. The Sisterhood started to turn its gaze outward, just as the world began to turn upside down. Dear members, at this very minute, some of our brethren are being tortured, starved, and beaten to death. This, dear friends, is no figment of a morbid imagination. It's a painful and horrible fact. Are we to shrug our shoulders and say, "Isn't it dreadful, those poor unfortunate souls"? Have we become so smug, so soft with luxury, so callous to human suffering? I say no. Underneath that soft, smooth exterior, I know that we, the Jewish women of our community, still have hearts that beat and feel for our fellow man. So for pity's sake, let us do something about it. And they did, as Jews, as Americans, and as women of their time. The Sisterhood asked every woman's heart to answer the call of the world, wrapping bandages, knitting for the SOS, putting together bundles of clothing for refugees in Palestine, and providing Purim and Hanukkah baskets for our boys. Perhaps their most extraordinary accomplishment occurred during one of the war bond drives, when the Sisterhood collected $110,000 to purchase a hospital plane for the evacuation of wounded American servicemen. Despite these terrible times, the women understood the need for levity in community life as well. In a 1945 event, Miss Eleanor A. Nash, clothing advisor at Bonwood Teller, advised the women on how to choose styles that bring out your personality, know what your best colors are, and find a hairdo that does not worry you. In the post-war 1940s, new initiatives began with the creation of the Happy Day Fund, which sent needy children to summer camp, and the Neediest Cases Project, which provided assistance to the broader Jewish community. Through this program, they adopted a child named Stuart and paid for the boy's wooden leg every year as he grew. Even in the 40s, the annual luncheon was a serious fundraiser, and as always, executed with glamour and style. The theme of the 1947 annual luncheon was the fashions of 1948, and featured a fashion show with gowns by Trigère, furs by Maximilian, and jewels by Van Cleef & Arpels. One of the finest open meetings the Sisterhood has had this season took place Monday afternoon when Dr. Abraham Sperling, a member of the CCNY faculty, spoke on the Kinsey Report on Sex Behavior and What It Reveals. If you weren't present, you missed a stimulating discussion. It's common to think of women in the 1950s as happy homemakers, only focused on family life. Yet the women of the KJ Sisterhood were just as concerned with their roles outside of their homes. Today, more and more women are called upon to enter employment and community roles. They feel the urge of the times and restlessly search for a more creative existence. Women's changing role in the home, on the job, and in the community will be discussed at our next open luncheon meeting. Sisterhood's open meetings brought important topics of the day to the forefront: U.S. politics, Israel and the UN, and attitudes on integration, to name just a few. With the state of Israel a reality, the Sisterhood rallied the KJ women to help the new nation. Our request for canned food for Israel met with an exceptionally warm response. The result? Over 5 large cartons with canned food ready to be shipped to Israel where it is needed so desperately. Social events continue to have their place. Every year it seems to us that it's impossible for this gala event to become more beautiful. And every year, somehow the ladies of our congregation, with an eye for the aesthetic and with imaginative ingenuity, manage to exceed even the superlative. This year, the luncheon was a vision of dainty loveliness, and every member of the Sisterhood is to be congratulated upon her part in making it so. May this milestone be for you, not the culmination of effort, but a beginning of achievement. May it signify not the end of an era, but the onset of a golden age. May it constitute not the twilight of your organizational life, but the dawn of accomplishment and fulfillment. The true highlight of the 1960s was the Sisterhood's Diamond Jubilee, celebrated at the 1961 annual luncheon. It promised to be the most memorable affair in the history of the Sisterhood. Held at the Pierre, it certainly lived up to its promise. Rabbi Haskell Lookstein surprised the attendees with a presentation entitled, "This is Your Life, Kehilat Yeshurun Sisterhood," with colorful anecdotes and profiles of past presidents. Rabbi Lookstein helped the women relive the history of the Sisterhood. Concluding remarks were offered by Rabbi Joseph Lookstein, who emphasized, what is significant is continuity of life as it spins its way through the tapestry of time. In 1964, with a newly built synagogue house, which included a new social hall and auditorium, events and luncheons could now be held at our very own synagogue. Near the end of the decade, after the 1967 war, the Sisterhood and the Men's Club jointly sponsored a talk given by Rabbi Haskell Lookstein entitled, "Israel from a New Perspective." According to those who were there, this was the largest attendance for any Sisterhood or Men's Club function at the time. With a strong foundation in place, the 1970s and 80s found the Sisterhood devoted to the fabric of the community. 1972 marked KJ's 100th anniversary, and the congregation was honored at the Sisterhood's Centennial Luncheon held at the Waldorf Astoria. It was quite the fete, elegant and inspiring, attended by 354 women. The most dramatic moment came when Sisterhood President Monica Hollander spoke of what it meant for her, a survivor of Auschwitz, to actually be present here in New York to celebrate the 100th anniversary of this congregation. At the 1974 Spring Luncheon, friends and family paid tribute to the multifaceted Gertrude Lookstein. Audrey Lookstein, Sisterhood president at the time, had the privilege to present her mother-in-law with a beautiful silver sculpture from Israel. Beautifying the synagogue and enhancing the spirituality of the congregation continued to be valued causes. Launching a fundraising effort for a new congressional chuppah, 30 women worked well over a year under the leadership of Estelle Baumgarten. In 1978, at the 106th annual KJ meeting, a gorgeous needlepoint chuppah was presented. To this day, the chuppah continues to grace many community weddings. One of the most significant contributions of the Sisterhood to KJ was the creation of 13 needlepoint Torah covers under the direction of Beatrice Kolb. At a dignified dedication, the Torahs, bearing the covers, were presented at the 112th meeting in 1984. Each Torah cover was dedicated by members of the congregation, and each carries their names. Like the chuppah, the Torah covers remain a part of the ritual created by the Sisterhood and viewed by the congregation every time the Aron is opened. Sisterhood activities in the 1990s revolved around supporting charities that help people locally, like Project Ezra, and throughout the world, like the UJA. With the launch of hands-on cooking classes, the Sisterhood also introduced another way for KJ women to connect socially. One highlight in the 90s was the celebration in 1997 of KJ's 125th anniversary. Mrs. Lillian Jacobs shared this story as the Sisterhood honored the anniversary with a trip down memory lane. Upon my husband's urging, I attended the very first meeting of the Sisterhood, where I had the privilege of meeting my lifelong best friend, Gertie Lookstein. The early 2000s were colored by the aftermath of 9/11 and the continuing crises in the State of Israel. In 2002, the Sisterhood organized the Midrachov on East 85th Street. The program was held on Mother's Day, and the theme was, "This Mother's Day, take your mother to Israel on East 85th Street." To benefit local charitable groups, in 2005 we held a Family Mitzvah Day with fun activities that benefited groups like Project Door and Met Council. The past decade also saw the Sisterhood playing a role in the ritual needs of our community. In 2006, the Sisterhood helped to provide funding for the Jacques and Hannah Schwalbe Mikveh, the first mikveh on the Upper East Side. Over the past 130 years, the KJ Sisterhood has grown and evolved. On the outside, our hems went up, our gloves came off, and hats became optional. Our social activities went from strawberry festivals and sewing to museums and theaters. The focus of our fundraising efforts varied, from a plane for the war effort and tuition for the deserved, to food for the needy and support for the infirmed. What has remained constant and true is the Sisterhood's focus on charity, community, culture, and commitment to the synagogue. The world around us may change, but the KJ Sisterhood remains timeless.